okay? Yeah, we got some special greetings today. First of all, Betty Sullivan. She's an old friend for all of us, but she's a former neighbor of the Keys, a neighbor of ours. And she was with Sigrud the last few years, almost daily, probably daily, sometimes twice a day. They would talk for hours. And I could hear Sigrud laughing. They're the best medicines you have. It's a perfect place. Sigrud talked about a church service initially. She had 3 hymns picked out. She had the minister picked out. Denial, Reverend Denial. But as time went on, she became she thought more about service by the water. She grew up in the Pacific. She had years in the Minnesota lakes and finished in the Atlantic. So this is a perfect setting for her. Let's see. Craig hasn't arrived yet. I was going to introduce his Annie, another Annie, but he's not here. So we'll go on to. Let's move on to there are an awful lot of sailors in this group, and I want to pay tribute to the patriarch of the Barker family, John Barker. Probably the best sailor in Rhode Island. Excuse me, I'm having a little trouble with this.
It's okay.
Okay, let's move forward here. We were married 64 years. And any long marriage like that, you're going to have ups and downs. And we have our ups and downs. Mostly they're up. If there's love underneath, you're going to make it. I think the test of a long marriage, if you can, at the end, if you can share a glass of wine, look at the sunset, that's about as good as it gets. And that's what we had. We met August of 1957. I'd just been transferred from Air Base in the south up to Sacramento, a new Air Force base. Our job was to go out over the Pacific and look for the Russian planes. This was the Cold War, and we're always worried about the Russians coming in. So they had planes going up both coasts for at least 30 years. And that was our job. Sigrud arrived in Sacramento at the same time. Her partner just across the line, fortunately. Yeah, that's fate, I guess. And this is her first teaching job. There were 2 things that impressed me about Sigrud that no other woman, girl, well, every man should have a daughter. There were 2 things that impressed me. That the girls that I dated, the girls that I knew, they did not have these characteristics. The first one, her coming home early dates and sat down and she said, "How about a game of chess?" I played chess. All the men that I knew played chess. All my fraternity guys played chess. I didn't know any girl that played chess. In fact, if those of you that happen to watch The Queen's Gambit on Netflix, there was a comment in there, international tournament in Moscow, and somebody said, "Why aren't there more women here?" And the comment was, "Women do not play chess," which apparently they did in the 1950s. Sigrud played chess. She challenged me to a game, and I said, "Well, this should be easy." I didn't know girls played chess. She said, "Okay." I said, "Good, but let's make it 2 out of 3. I won the letter. Possibly. She won the first 2. We never played the third. She was good. was introducing the special guests, and one of them actually is Annie. Now Annie, you're Annie, right? You're Annie. Not the, there's another Annie here. And, oh yeah, okay. And Annie, you're from Connecticut. I don't know much about you. You're from Connecticut. Is that mainly your life? Is that you've been most of the time? Okay. You're not a sailor, are you? I mean, we're not sailors. No? No.
I'm more of a I'm not about the journey, I'm about the destination. So I'd rather have a
I like that. So anyway, welcome, Annie.
Thank you.
So we were talking, what were we talking about?
Chess.
Oh, what?
Chess.
Oh, chess, yeah. So after, okay, now we're moving on to the second thing that impressed me about Sigrud. This is my wife. In the 1950s, fathers took their sons aside and told them how to shake hands. It's very important. Our father said, if you got to shake hands and they have a well-shined shoe, they got a head wag. So our father said, good girl, look that person right in the eye and say, how do you do, sir? And the second thing, yeah, make sure your shoes are shiny. Now, when a man, that was man to man. When you're introduced to a woman, an entirely different story. In the 1950s, a woman would never offer her hand to a man when an introduction took place. A man would offer his hand first. And when you're holding her hand, we were told primarily by mothers, when you're holding her hand, just gently, just not too hard, because and they would gently squeeze your hand back. That was the handshake, and times have changed. You look at these girls play hockey today, and you know how much times have changed. So, all right. So we're moving. We dated that whole year, and well, we started dating in September. I was discharged in March or something or other. We were married the following June, and a very nice thing happened. She was teaching in Sacramento. A very nice thing happened on her last day in school. The school was out, just the janitors were working around. She was packing her bags, and her mother, 35 mothers, came into her schoolroom with this beautiful great tray. And they said, we want to give this to you because the children that were in your room were the only ones that really, unlike our siblings, the only ones that enjoyed school. They said, we want to go to Miss Mall's class because she was fun. That gives you an idea of what kind of a teacher she was. So anyway, we dated that year, and now we're getting married in June. We really hadn't really known each other that long. And a lot of her friends, some of my friends said, you guys don't know each other. You got a date. Of course, when you one in Minneapolis and one in San Francisco, it's pretty hard to date. They said, you're taking a real gamble, guys. You don't know each other. Well, the beautiful thing is, when you're 25 years old, you know everything. That's a great age. It's a wonderful age, and we knew everything. We knew everything was going to work out. I remember my father the night before took me aside and said, son, there's some things you should know about women and marriage. I said, Dad, I got it. You know, I've been to college, in the military. I've dated Sigrud. We know what's going on. We're okay, but thanks, Dad, we're okay. Great age, 25. I wish I was back there again. So, okay, we got married. I said, oh, we're moving to Minnesota now. That's her first job, and that was my job. And the first thing she did, her credit, when she was in her elementary school, elementary education, getting her degree, elementary education, her had to write a thesis, like a capstone, as you guys did. And her capstone was on Marie Montessori. Marie Montessori, if you know, was one of the leading educators of the 20th century. And her premise was, her premise was, don't wait till your children are in kindergarten. They're ready to learn at age 2 and 3. Their motor skills, their mental skills, they're ready. So teach them early. And Montessori schools have spread all over the place since then. So one of the first things Sigrud did in Rosetta, she didn't know anybody. except me, and she met my parents. She established the Wayzata Montessori School in about 2 weeks' time. You get you can get lesson plans, etc., through the main office. So she got, and somehow she found some volunteers, and that Wayzata Montessori School has now branched into 6 of the Minneapolis western suburbs today. Now, now we're getting into her own school, the Wayzata Kindergarten School. And I'm going to tell you a beautiful love story. If I can get through it, Honda's going to help me. The first day of school, kindergarten. In come the mothers, the kids in tow. They were told to bring a paper bag with their lunch. So here come the mothers with their lunch. And this is little Billy, Mrs. O'Meara. He's homesick, so keep him near your desk. And here comes little Sammy, Mrs. O'Meara. He's very ambitious, so keep him near her desk so we can quiet him down. And here's little Judy, and Judy needs to go potty a lot, so you're gonna have to. The rest of the kids were pretty good. So there were about 9 or 10 special situations. The rest of them. But now this is it. This is the tough part. Over here, I thought coming home on 2 engines was tough, but over here, so the young girl, nicely dressed, just standing there. No mother, no little brown bag, just all very forlorn, sad looking. This little girl turned out to be one of the leading educators in this country. She published 3 books. She dedicated her last one to Sigrud, and Honda's going to read that dedication. But during so she takes this little girl to her desk. All of the children, 35 kids, they all have desks with their names on it, and they're all scattered around. The mothers by this time have scattered. And she said, what's your name, dear? Connie. Turned out Connie was only 4 years old. How she got into kindergarten at age 4? Because I think there was a state law in Minnesota is, and you cannot, maybe a state law in every state, you cannot enroll your child until they're 5. But as Hannah's going to, when she reads it, you're going to realize that the mother didn't have much time for her. And she thought, well, hell, send her to kindergarten. 4 years old, and she'd only been 4 for about 4 months. So little Connie, she found Connie's desk. And when the school, they had 2 sessions. One session went age 30, or 12:30. Another session came at 1:30. The children with a brown bag had lunch. And Connie said, can I stay for the second session? Just stay with you. Sigrud called her mother and said, sure, we don't care. You can stay with us. So Connie, the rest of that year, stayed with Sigrud during that lunch hour. And then when the second group came in, she would stay also again with Sigrud. They would, I don't know what they were talking about. What are you talking about? It was a 4-year-old. Sigrud always found something to talk about anybody. So they were talking, and then this went on and on. Connie would often come to our house, Walkerwood, during the weekend, and they would have lunch together. And this went on, and they became excellent friends. They just loved each other. When Sigrud stayed in kindergarten, next year Connie went to 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade, and she would keep coming back during recess and lunchtime and back to Sigrud, and they kept talking. Finally, I think Connie was 8. Her parents got divorced, they divided the kids up. Connie was given, that's kind of right, when she was given to her, actually, without her father, it was very complicated. They were involved with another couple. She went off with the other couple's husband, and she and Connie got along with that person very well. So she went with him to Lorraine County, south of San Francisco, and the other stayed in Wayzata. And but they kept in contact. Telephone calls, Christmas cards, etc., etc. Connie went to high school somewhere in Marin County, wherever the high school is in Marin County. And then she went on, it might have been DeKalb, I'm not sure. She got an MA, or bachelor's, and went on to get an MA. And Honda's going to take it from here. But, my point is that this friendship continued for 60 years.
Hi everyone. Great.
Hello.
You hear me fine? Yep. I'm going to be reading a dedication from Connie's book.
This third book, second publication, this is the third one, was dedicated to Sigrud.
This was dedicated to my grandmother, and I'm going to be reading the acknowledgement. Sig Holmeyer was my kindergarten teacher. She had me for only half a day for one school year, but how she interacted with me changed my life forever. I was only 4 years old. She loved me unconditionally, and even though I was a young child, she treated me with respect. She saw who I was and helped me see myself as a contribution and as a precious person. I had gotten the message from my family that I was too loud, too emotional, too dramatic, basically too much. I felt that something was wrong with me. I had a lot of energy, and sitting still was not easy for me. I needed a lot of attention for a variety of reasons, and I think I did whatever I needed to try to get that attention. Even though some of my behaviors were somewhat challenging, and I'm sure not easy to deal with, Sig Holmeyer always interacted with me as if my energy was a contribution. She didn't recoil at my neediness. She actually leaned in and helped me provide the attention I needed. From the day I left her classroom, I never had another teacher who affected me as much as she did. By the age of 10, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I loved young children, and I wanted to be Sig Holmeyer. Thanks to Sig, I did just that. I became an early childhood teacher and then an adult educator. Sig lit a fire of desire in me that has motivated me and instilled in me the belief that anyone working with young children or with adults can change a life forever by how they interact with others, and being fully present to each person and respecting their unique way of being human. If you can witness the gem that lies within a person, polish that gem, and help that person see the gem that they are, you are touching a life in the deepest way. I have been blessed with a professional path in which I work with both young children and adults, allowing me to witness their unfolding as they each become the gem that they are. Sig inspired me then, and she still inspires me to this day. I'm still in touch with her. Not only professionally, but also personally and spiritually, as I feel the desire and longing to become all of who I can be in the service of others. And this book is signed by her and was sent to my grandmother. And it says, "To my beloved Sig, your unconditional love and care touched my life forever and is what inspired me to teach and to give back what you so generously gave to me. I love you always."
Just to wrap this up, during her lifetime, she influenced the kids that were in her teaching class, or what do you call it? That if you get a degree, you have to have a class you teach, whatever it's called. Then she had the Sacramento kids. Then she had the Wayzata kids. She had her own children, which she influenced. She had Connie, then that's the best part of it. She had the grandchildren. And if she was here today, speaking to you five guys, wherever you are, five people, she would say, do what your parents did, and your aunts and your uncles. Take the path of least resistance. And this, she's referring to Robert Frost. Remember when Robert Frost went through the woods and he came to a fork? And he said, everybody took the right fork. Very few took the left. It wasn't matted down like the right fork. He said the left fork, path of least resistance, and that made all the difference. And that's what she did in her life. If she was to talk to you guys today, she would take the left fork, do your own thing, be your own person. And while you're on the left fork, spread some joy, cause a few smiles, and also don't forget to leave a footprint. Leave a footprint so the world would know that you passed through. Thank you.
We don't have any strict order.
We are all here today to celebrate our dear Sigrud. Her living spirit is by my side. It was a happy day when Bob and I learned that Sig and Paul were building their house in Pinecrest at the same time we were building our house in Happy Hills, 5-minute walk apart. This was the beginning of a lifelong friendship. Was there ever a night that we didn't get together for a glass of wine for the ladies and a beer for Paul and Bob? We only had Sally and Rob and Tom and Kristen in the early days, but Peter and Steve soon followed. Paul thought it was time for us to buy a sailboat. Paul was our captain. He was the only one who knew how to sail. We loved being out on Lake Minnetonka, and Spirit Island was our fun spot to stop for a picnic and a swim. Happy times continued. The kids grew up. We moved to Saudi Arabia, but always came home to Minnesota in the summer. Sigrud and Paul were waiting for us with our glasses of wine ready. I miss you, my dear Sigrud. You are always in my heart.
Hi everybody, I'm Lynn, and I have some words from Tom, who is in Cambodia, and here's what he says. I'm so sorry I can't be with you today at this celebration of Sigurd's life. As some of you know, that a concussion led to my canceling my travel plans, as long flights can cause complications. I'm truly sorry not to be there, but I am so thrilled that all of you have made it. Wow. Where does one begin to talk about a life like my mom's? You undoubtedly know and have heard today and have been thinking about how Siggy was kind, generous, incredibly funny, thoughtful, and a source of advice and consolation to anyone who came to her with their troubles. And for the 3 Holmeyer kids, having her as our mother was an incredible gift. She was encouraging in everything that we did, and particularly for me as it related to music, art, film, and travel. She was curious about the world, and she shared that curiosity with us, leading to all of us having a life of traveling around the world starting at a young age. And we all continue to do so, which is why I'm writing these words from tropical Cambodia. I can't imagine having lived a different life than I have lived, and I'm so incredibly grateful for my mother. The things that she did when she was young, imagine growing up as a child of immigrants during those times of San Francisco. And yes, she told us countless stories, going through some of her things since she has passed. I've become even more aware of what a remarkable life that she's had. She was proud of both her German and her Swedish heritage, and she shared that heritage with us. And now I'm thinking about those special memories of growing up in Minnesota. I remember fondly of her taking us to Wayzata Beach to swim and buying us ice cream sandwiches from that big vending truck when we were young. Or what about the grilled cheese and milkshake lunches at Rexall Drug after our childhood doctor appointments, especially the dentist. Trips to San Francisco to visit her family, that's where I discovered hippies, skateboards, and the ocean. She always remained the consummate California girl, despite being in chilly California, or chilly Minnesota or Rhode Island for so many years. It was Sigrud that bought me my first Beatles record, as well as my first guitar at age 8. And that led for me to become a member playing in many different kind of bands. But just one funny story. When I started college, I was in overflow housing with 2 bunks and 4 people in a small dorm room. It was crazy. And when I told she and Paul about this over the phone, her reply was, well, if you find a good band, just feel free to quit school. Now, remember, I had started school at age 22, so I don't recall Paul being too thrilled with her response to me. But it simply showed her love, her encouragement, her unconditional love, and her pride in me, that whatever made us happy, no matter what, that's what she wanted for us. That was just the story that was just told to us by Connie. And I still play in bands today thanks to her influence. And by the way, I did stay in school and graduated from college. I also think of all the remarkable older vintage films that she introduced us to. And that's what led me to go to film school at Montana State. Once when I was living in Minneapolis, she called me. By the way, I was in my early 30s, and I was going on a date with my mother. She said, oh, there's this great French film playing at the nearby theater. I haven't seen that film since my college days. Do you want to come with me? And even though I wasn't really in the mood to go out with my mom on a Friday night, I said yes. And we ended up seeing the classic Jacques Tati film, Mr. Hulot's Holiday. And today that remains one of my favorite all-time films. How did she continue to impact our lives like that? I have to say that I actually learned more about films from Sigrud than I did in my 4 years pursuing a film degree. Things like that were simply intuitive from Sigrud. And now I'm thinking about all the fun and all the laughter that we had during family celebrations and gatherings. She had a lifelong youthful spirit that attracted people to her of all ages. She was sort of a second mother to many of our friends. And memories of her dancing to that reggae band in the Virgin Islands, traveling throughout Europe, skiing, tennis, and more. She loved to be around people, and she was always up for a good time. But you all know that. She traveled with me to Montana State during my college orientation, and I'll always remember that we went hiking in the mountains above Bozeman. And that evening, as we were at the restaurant, the waitstaff were convinced that my own mother was my girlfriend. Yes, she was always young at heart and very beautiful. And who could forget that phone call I received from her one day telling me she had found my future wife at her wedding reception. Now, I admit, I was skeptical at best. And as certainly I didn't think I needed any help in my dating life. But once again, she was right. And I knew that after the first date. Now, I think it took Lynn and me a little bit longer to realize this, but we've had a remarkable time together these past 25 years. Siggy strikes again. So to wrap up, I just want to reiterate that all of us here are so grateful for so much in our lives that have come from Sigrud. Many of us here would not quite be the people we are today if it wasn't for my wonderful mother, from Tom.
I don't have too much to say, but I just wanted to say that as I remember Sigrud, it will always be, no matter what, filled with love and joy and compassion. And I wish I'd known her longer, long enough as some of you guys had the pleasure of knowing. That's it.
I know most of you here. I've seen all of you here, even when you were this big. I'm Craig Schultz. I grew up down the street from. I didn't actually grow up down the street from the Homeyers. I grew up in the Homeyer house, and then I had another family that lived down the street. I was blessed to know Sig better than many people. Spent many years getting to know her. And as I hear the words like unconditional love and smiling, the one thing that I was, all right, hold on. Her laugh was unmistakable, and it was always present. And it was a laugh that made all the problems kind of go away. You knew things were going to be okay, even if they weren't. There was lots of times they weren't. Pete and I would go out and do something really stupid, potentially even illegal, and come back and Sig would just laugh about it. Like, oh, I'm sure you had a reason to run that red light in front of the cop and get the ticket. There was probably a reason you were in a hurry. It probably wasn't true, but she made everything feel so much better. And you could tell even later in her life, I would call her up. How you doing, Sig? Well, my back is really messed up. It hurts like heck every day. I'm in terrible pain. Ha ha ha. And her laugh would come out no matter what. And it was constant. She had this amazing laugh and smile. And it really made you feel very special. I would come over and she had a piano. And of course, she would ask me to play the piano. And I was not Tchaikovsky. I was better than Pete. But I was not Tchaikovsky. And she would sit there and laugh and smile. Even if I played the stupidest songs and I probably played them wrong, she would still enjoy the time that we had at the piano. And I remember one time, this was really early on, we were having a sleepover. And Sig had gone to Baker's Square to buy pies. And if you remember, I don't know if everybody remembers Baker's Square pies. Pete loved the French silk. And she brought home French silk pie as well as boysenberry pie. And then she managed to load up 5 boys with probably 2 or 3 slices of pie each. Now we were, 8, 9 years old, something like that, so we were high as a kite on sugar. We were bouncing off the walls. So we go downstairs to go to bed. That didn't happen. We ended up chasing each other around the pool table for about an hour because we could not contain our energy. And it started getting late, and Paul is not a man of many words. So when he does speak, especially when you're a young boy, you listen. And that happens when he comes downstairs, thumping his way down the basement because there's 6 boys raising Cain, chasing each other around the pool table. And he said, "It's time for bed." And it was definitely time for bed. So we all got into our sleeping bags, kind of looking out like, are we going to be okay? Paul goes back upstairs to go to bed. And about 10 minutes later, you hear a little creak at the door opening into the basement. And she says, "Anybody want a pie?" So 5 boys go traipsing back upstairs to consume yet more sugar and go to bed much more quietly this time. But she always wanted to make it better. She always wanted to make sure that everyone around her was okay. And if it wasn't, she would laugh and she would smile and make you feel like it was all going to be fine. She did that for 40 years of my life. I don't miss her.
Great, I get to follow Craig. So I've been really calm today, which means I'm probably going to lose it up here. Chrissy's got really the eulogy. I wanted to focus on some things that just were funny, snippets, things that hit me hard but mean a lot to me. So we've heard unconditional love. Yep, gonna lose it. That's the number one thing I wrote down. They're just ever present. There's no judgment, but there's help. It's the number one thing she gave me. And the second thing, which is pretty funny because she must have thought I had a lot more talent than I do. You can do anything. Anything. You can live anywhere, you can travel anywhere, you can try anything. Those are the 2 things when I remember my mom. And it's a long list behind that. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit later in life. It's an easier story to tell because it's kind of funny. I think you guys have heard my mom love music. She was in the church choir. We had music playing 24/7 at the house. And the 80s came, and most of you have heard of Prince. Prince was getting big. And he was big because he was in our backyard in Minneapolis. We all watched this movie called Purple Rain. And Tommy, Christy, and I wanted to go to the Prince concert. I said, I really want to go to a concert. She didn't say much. But I think I can't remember if I was 8th grade or 9th grade. It was probably about 10:30 in the morning. And there's a knock at the door, and it opened, and there's my mom. And she goes, we got in a car, and we drove down, because back then you could get concert tickets at record shops. We drove to a place called The Sound of Music in Ridgedale. We got 4 tickets to see Prince. And she just busted me out of school for that. Because that was more important. And she was right. So we had 6th row center. And there's a thing going on then, I hope it is not continued, but women used to grab hands at concerts and run through the men's room. And at one point we all went to the bathroom, and Tommy and I were wondering where my mother and my sister were. And they came back later, and they did the loop through the men's room. My mom. But that was her. So that was a good one. Wait, I just lost my paper. I know another thing I was going to talk about, which I'm kind of surprised it did not come up yet in a bigger way, but I'm sure you're going to address it, which is animals. And she loved animals. And it wasn't just animals. She just loved the little guy. She wanted to help out the little guy. She didn't care about the person who was doing great. I mean, she did, I guess. But she was there to help the weak, the ones that were in trouble, the ones that were suffering, the ones that were just confused and sad. But we had had these funny things with the animals. We had majors for the deer, and my poor dad had to go to the feed store and get like 500 pounds of deer food a week. I was lifting the bags every night to feed up the deer. And then there's Raccoon Park. And there we had water bowls and food that needed to go. And then there's another area if the cats were coming in, the feral ones. But I remember just these snippets of things that were so unbelievable. You probably wouldn't even see this like on National Geographic. I came home once, I think I was in college. She's like, oh, do you want to feed the raccoons? I was like, sure. She's like, well, come with me. I got something new. She opened the sliding glass door. She had Roman meal bread, just local bread, I guess. And she put a slice out onto the stoop. The raccoons got in line. And one by one, they went like this. It's a true story. Grabbed their bread, moved on, the next one shuffled over. And that was just one of those mom things. And like, you just kind of said, yeah, mom would do that. It was pretty incredible. Somebody referenced kids coming over to our house. My mom and dad both loved younger people. They were interested in what they were doing, what they were thinking, what were their hopes, their dreams, what got them excited. And we had an old wicker couch in our kitchen, and we probably had 500 kids over the years sitting on that couch, sometimes opening up completely, sometimes talking to my mom and my dad because they didn't necessarily have an outlet, talking about what colleges they might go to, what their fears were. Is incredible. So we had a lot of kids, we had a lot of cats. One of the biggest cats she fed was Craig, who you just heard from. He came over a lot for food and housing. She watched him get bigger, get stronger, set him free in the wild, and he's thrived ever since.
Still feral.
Yeah, that's debatable. This happened more than once, but I remember one time in particular, I was, I think, a sophomore in college, and I came home for the holidays, and I had to go to our local grocery store called Lund's to do shopping for Christmas dinner. And I had my mom's credit card to pay. And the cashier looks at it, shows it to the bag boy. I'm like, what? They smile, and she said, oh, are you Peter or Tom? Peter. You're older, right? How's your sophomore year going? And I heard you're thinking about studying abroad. This happened in the produce section at Lund's one year. At the deli at Lund. I mean, it was all over the place. She would just talk and talk and talk. And I think what fascinated me so much was she took such amazing interest in people. She just loved talking and hearing. She talked a lot too, but she also liked to listen. You know, my dad touched upon some of the things, but building the Montessori school her first month in Minnesota is insane. And it's still there and it's expanded. And we see it when we drive along 394. She was a docent at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. Why? Just because she wanted to be around art and help people learn about art. She was on the board of the Minnesota Dance Theater. If anybody's heard of Lois Holton, you know, she worked with her. That's really pretty cool. Kindergarten we've talked about. The other thing that was amazing to me was Bible study. She was not a table pounder. She wouldn't get in your face, but she had a faith. And she sang in church choir for 40 years. Amazing. And she developed a lot of friendships through that. But it was another component of music and her love for the arts. I know you're going to talk about this one, so I'll be quick. But it's pretty cool when you get a kindergarten teacher when you're young, one-on-one. And I remember when we'd say, I kind of got a sniffle, I don't feel really well. We were kept home. But being kept home was interesting. I remember I must have been 5 or 6. Gets me in the living room, sitting Indian style, and I hear this music come on the speakers, and she hands me Beethoven's Fifth. That is the LP case. And what my mom always did, and what I loved her for, there was always pencil and paper around. So you could express yourself if you loved to draw or write. So she said, why don't you listen to this? You're sick, right? Wink, wink. Another time, she opened up a book and it was a Sistine Chapel. Getting paper and pencil. Why don't you look at this book? Tell me if you like it. There's no directives. just laid out. You can do what you want, like the Montessori school. And those days out of school, I learned a hell of a lot more than I ever did in school. And she knew what she was doing. So I love you, Mom. I love what you stood for. I love your just belief in the truth and trying to find the good, not the bad in people. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess I'm the eulogist. Glasses. After hearing all of these stories, I feel like a lot of what I've... Is the volume okay, by the way? A lot of what I had written is a little repetitive, so I'll pull out a few bits. I was thinking as I finished what I wanted to say about something that someone told me when I was younger, and it might have been Dr. Betty Johnson, maybe not, but I think it might have been you, Betty, who said, you are born one parent and you become the other. So I don't know that I can attribute that to you. And at the time, whoever said to me, I thought, well, that's kind of ridiculous. But I was a very shy child, and yet I've written 5 pages to talk to you about. So the inner Sigrud has come out of me. I was thinking of some of what I've written is repetitive, but with Sigrud, there's always another story. So I thought I would share some of my most vivid memories with you. My mom was first and foremost a caring, emotionally driven person. She always loved children, having been a beloved teacher, and she understood even the challenging ones other teachers wrote off as bad or deficient. While my mom had retired from teaching when I arrived, she never really stopped her work. Tom, Pete, and I just became her new students, and in a whole new classroom. Rather than focusing on academics, our mom showed us what was important to her, what she enjoyed, and Sigrud was passionate about so many things. She loved animals for their inherent goodness, art in all forms, and nature. My mom was also passionate about music, primarily classical, and perhaps more than any other activity, my mom loved to dance. And she wasn't shy about being voted best dancer in high school repeatedly. Sigrud was also very passionate about her family, telling us, and anyone else who would listen, countless stories of growing up as a first-generation American in San Francisco during the Depression. The stories she recounted were of hard work, strict family values, intellectual dinner table conversations, and an abundance of mischievous fun. Some of my earliest memories are of my mom reading stories about animals. Sigrud taught us to love and respect all creatures, from the salamanders and deer in our yard and woods to the characters in the storybooks. Of course, inside the house, these lessons applied to cats. I think my mom viewed the cats as her other children. While we had to learn the rules of feline care and respect, we were also encouraged to have fun with our feline siblings. I still recall my mom saying, "Here's an idea. Why don't you dress the cats in Pete's baby clothes and take them out for a stroll in the carriage?" And of course I did. There were serious lessons too, as when we were driving down County Road 6 late to some school event, and my mom hit the brakes. There's an animal on the side of the road. She got out of the car and went around, and she didn't pull over. She stopped right in the one lane. And she said, "It's a cat." And meanwhile, there were a couple of cars coming up behind us. She got out, she stopped, there was a truck behind us, and the guy said, "Lady, I'm in a hurry." She said, "You can go as soon as you help me get this cat in the back of my car." So he fortunately had a newspaper or a bag of some sort, and they lifted it into the back of the car, and he probably took it to the vet and sped off to a very late school event. But my mom would have done anything for an animal, and I think she felt that animals were the purest creatures, much more so than humans. I also remember exploring the woods behind our house with my mom. She would stop and pause to listen to birds, teaching me one from another. Her eyes were trained on bird feathers on the forest floor, which we would collect and save. We also collected fall leaves in their colorful prime and pressed them between wax paper. Wildflowers also found their way to the flower press. The best prize was finding a bird egg or a bird nest, and all of these gifts were brought home for further study. At night, when the nocturnal creatures sprung to life, along with most of our family, we would listen to crickets, frogs, and the occasional owl, and go on walks around the neighborhood, gazing at stars and savoring the peacefulness of nighttime. By the way, my mom and I wore our nightgowns on these walks, and were regularly accompanied by a cat or two. I thought this was a typical mother-daughter activity until I was about in first grade and realized that no one else was doing this with their moms at midnight or 1 in the morning. When I grew older, we had a lot of animals living around us and amongst us. We've touched on the raccoons, families, and how she would hand feed those in need, or those that were abandoned, or those that were injured. The stray cats were a big part of our lives. They always seemed to know which house to go to. My dad once said, I think there's a neon sign at the bottom of our hill. It said like availability or vacancy. Each arrived with some sort of damage, and each was gradually and gently coaxed into our house and coaxed into our family. My mom taught us a lot about art and music. We grew up with art supplies always within reach, and were taught how to draw, paint, make elaborate Play-Doh sculptures, and dye Ukrainian Easter eggs. As to music, we had one record player in the house, which was kept in the kitchen, and we learned about Mozart and Beethoven as composers and individual pieces which she thought were the most impressive and those we should know as young children. We repeatedly heard Handel's Messiah through the holidays, as well as German Christmas music during the holidays as well. Okay, so this is a fun part. On weekends, my parents either hosted or went to cocktail parties in the neighborhood with their amazing group of friends. On these nights, when the party was at our house, our record player livened up with the sounds of the Kingston Trio, Harry Belafonte, and Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. I got to see a different side of my mom on these nights. Sigrud loved people and loved a party, but on these nights she would dress up and look like a movie star in my eyes. Unbeknownst to the adults, I would sit under the dining table, hidden beneath the tablecloth, and delight in the sounds of the party and my view of knees down, all the feet in the calves, and hearing all the laughter and the fun that they were having. Sigrud also introduced us to old films. It started with A Midsummer Night's Dream, starring Mickey Rooney, and gradually led up to every film starring her favorite duo, Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. The Homeyer kids grew up loving classic black and white movies, which was unusual amongst our peers. And I think we all still consider it a gift. My mom taught us a lot about authority, having been raised in a very strict European family. When it is right, regarding authority, she taught us when it is right and when it is not. As kids, we were always taught to respect our elders with politeness and graciousness at all times. We should also respect teachers, school principals, and the law. But that depended on the circumstances. As a teacher herself, my mom was a great judge of educators. She revered good teachers and felt those lacking in talent were truly a waste of time. My fourth grade teacher, Mr. Timbrell, unfortunately fell into the latter category. I had repeatedly complained about his painfully boring class, and after attending parent-teacher conferences, my mom agreed. It was at that time that we came up with a plan for academic enrichment. If I were sick and had to stay home, I would be able to read classic literature, go outside to study nature, listen to Beethoven, and make art. And so began the semester of deceiving my dad. Sorry, Dad. On a semi-regular basis, I would awaken with a sore throat. My good dad, noting my absence at the breakfast table, would come upstairs and check on me. I would exclaim softly that I had a sore throat. Paul would then ask if I would come downstairs and try some applesauce, as that might help. Of course, no amount of applesauce was going to make me feel better, and so I was promptly sent upstairs to spend the day in bed. After Paul departed for work, Sigrud's homeschooling began. This vast improvement on my 4th grade year only lasted a few months, sadly. My next-door neighbor, Christy Kirchhoff, who was in my class, told Mr. Tembrell that her mom saw me doing cartwheels in my yard and strolling my dressed cats around in a baby carriage. And so therefore I could not consent. One of the most important lessons my mom taught me was about friendliness, not because I was an unfriendly child, because I was painfully shy. When I was young, I would accompany my mom on her errands, the Red Owl, Rexall Drugs, Rosetta Home Laundry. I was always happy to be out with my mom, but the other feeling I had is still hard to put into words. It was part fear and embarrassment and horror and bewilderment, essentially shock and awe. And it went like this. Sigrud and I would be in a store, most commonly the Red Owl, getting groceries. Of course, there were other people there. Within minutes, maybe even seconds, my mom would start a conversation with one of these people, and eventually, probably all of them by the time we got to the produce section. Being exceptionally shy, I would literally hide behind my mom. It might be a stock boy if she'd ask about tomatoes. It might even be a friend. But most often it was just someone she'd seen before in town, someone she'd recognized at the beach or at church. And she would just walk up to these people and speak to them, introduce herself, and then the unthinkable would happen. She would introduce me and try to pull me around from behind her skirt. We would eventually make it on our way to checkout, where Sigrud would chat with the cashier and the bag boy. She knew everyone's names and stories. She asked them about their families and their pets, their school classes. She'd comment on a new haircut or a new pair of eyeglasses. I don't recall exactly how many years I was so timid, or when I felt okay, standing by my mom's side while she discussed books with strangers at the bookcase or asked a teenage sales clerk at the bakery about her mother's operation. But eventually my fear did fade away, and I was no longer mortified to ask a question of someone I didn't know or pick up a prescription at the pharmacy. There couldn't have been a better role model for a shy child. My mom showed me how to use my voice whenever I was ready. Sigrud was clearly very social and loved a party. She loved to laugh and appreciated humor wherever she could find it. When I was in elementary school, our Uncle Gunnar sent us a record for Christmas. It was Monty Python's Flying Circus, something we had never heard of. We put it on and listened to this silly and naughty British humor. Paul didn't last long and left the room, but Sigrud and we kids were captivated in hysterics. We then learned that Monty Python was also a television show. I don't recall when it was on, but I know it was late, and I know it was on weekdays, school nights. There were many nights that Paul would come upstairs for bed, only to discover the 4 members of his family on his bed, watching that show he thought was completely ridiculous. And on a school night, no less. Yet when he asked what we were doing, watching this at such a late hour, Sigrud would say, "Oh, Paul, don't be such an old fuddy-duddy." And she would laugh, leaving Paul no choice but to join us on the bed. My mom was always curious about the world, much of an opportunity when we were kids, but always encouraged us to go out and explore the globe. When I was in college and spent my junior year in Vienna, Sigrud joined me in the summer for her first trip to Europe. My mom was a fabulous travel companion. She had such a positive attitude and was able to turn around any of the inevitable travel mishaps and disappointments. One such event stands out to me, and that was during our visit to Rome. Like many eager first-timers, we dutifully followed our guidebook, exploring all the important sites. One day we visited the Vatican museums and made it through all of them. Feeling exhausted by the end, we headed to the nearest exit and walked out into the Roman summer heat. We suddenly realized that it was probably not the official exit, as there was no signage as to where we were or to where to go. Not sure whether to head left or right, we chose randomly and started walking. Unfortunately, we made a poor choice, as we ended up walking nearly all the way around Vatican City before reaching the road back to our pensione. When we finally reached our destination, near the top of the Spanish Steps, we were drained, hot, sweaty, and hobbling on aching feet. Sigrud looked at our pensione, which was charming, yet lacking a lot, and at her despondent daughter. She then looked across the courtyard to the 5-star Hassler Hotel. She suggested that rather than retiring to our dark little room, we should revive ourselves with a cool drink in the Hassler's luxurious garden. So we entered the elegant foyer, and Sigrud motioned for the sign to the ladies' room. Once inside, we discovered a most lavish, marble-covered expanse. Sigrud flashed me her big smile and then checked the private water closets to see if anyone else was there. Finding we had the restroom to ourselves, my mom suggested that we take turns holding the door closed, while the others sat on the marble counter and bathed their feet in cold water from the gold-plated sinks. We both luxuriated in a cool foot bath and then proceeded to the garden for a refreshing cocktail or two. Sigrud knew how to change a mood and knew exactly how to rejuvenate for another late night of entertainment. In the years to follow, we Homeyer kids left home and established our own lives. Sigrud was our connection to Izetta, with regular phone calls and letters. Through every change of job, city, or significant other, Sigrud was part of our lives. Before long, there were grandchildren, and Sigrud was that kind of grandmother that grandchildren wanted to be. No matter what happened, her grandchildren were right, and smart, and beautiful, and perfect. She never missed a special day. If she didn't deliver it in person, there was a card in the mailbox for every birthday or celebration. She taught my children unconditional love. Before my parents moved to Little Compton, they would visit every summer for a few weeks. There was one night each year that was always my mom's favorite, and that is the annual Lawrence Point Beach Club Party. Every year there's a live band that plays great music until 10 o'clock, at which point the town goes into quiet mode. My mom would entice her children and grandchildren to the dance floor, and when they resisted or sat down to rest, Sigrud would dance with other people's children, or grandchildren, or anyone on the dance floor. She would dance in groups, she would dance alone, and always with a big smile on her face. Even when dancing became difficult, she was out there with her walking stick. And, not surprisingly, she was one of the last, if not the last, to leave the dance floor at 10 p.m. This was the happiest I ever saw my mom in her later years. With her family and music, dancing in the ocean, she was in her zone. The last lesson my mom taught us, this is where it gets tough. The last lesson my mom taught us was about strength. During the last 20 years of her life, Sigrud's body started to betray her. as her skeleton and systems continued to degrade, we kept saying, it can't get worse than this. And then it did, again and again. Through it all, my mom drew her strength from her family and primarily our grandchildren. Of all the family gatherings, birthdays, and holidays, my mom missed very few. She was always able to rally for the occasion and channel her party spirit. I will remember Sigrud for her strength, for her adventurous spirit, for her genuine welcome of everyone who walked through her door, and for her cats. My mom knew that life was serious and had its difficult passages, but that there was endless fun and laughter to be had if one just knew how to find it or cultivate it. And that is the lesson she would most likely want to pass on to all of us. Thank you.
Oh, so,
Before we depart the tent, and to lighten things up a little bit, very uncharacteristic for a memorial service, but very characteristic for Sigrud, is a song that we think she would really like us to all sing as we finished our service here. And we do have lyrics so we can all follow along, because you might not all know this song. Lindy, why don't you give a stat? Yeah. 1, 2. And Leo, just walk. Of course. Mexito.
Perfect.
You're set. Does everyone have their music? Yeah. Oh, we all are, Craig. Singing might be another story. Hey, John, you have two. I almost know it, but no.
I have.
there's extras.
Yeah. Thanks, honey.
All right, and she would expect us all to sing along, whether we can sing or not.
Ready?
We're ready.
Some things in life are pain, they can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, mumble, give a whistle, and this'll help things turn out for the best. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the bright side of life. If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. And always look on the bright side of life. Come on! Always look on the bright side of life. When you're in the World Cup and all your hopes are up, and everybody wants your team to win,
Maxie, this is a
and they
different
go
version.
and take you down, they come slinking back to town. It's time for this daft song to begin. So always look on the bright side of life. Cheer up. Next time. Always look on the bright side of life. For life is quite absurd, and it's the final word. You must always raise the curtain with a bow. Forget about your sin, give the audience a grin. Enjoy it, it's your chance anyhow. So it's true. You'll see it's all a show. People laughing as you go. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the bright side of life.
Thank you, everybody. Great singing. We are going to slowly, carefully, at our own pace, move toward the terrace and have some refreshments. Thank you, Dad.
All right. Betty, Ferrari. I'm gonna go get your Ferrari.
You know, it's probably true of every memorial service, the saddest thing to do that person. That was really nice. You know, they say that a lot of times spirits.
By chance, could you guys put this stuff back?
I had an interaction. Had an interaction.
Boy, a lot of common
Really
themes
strange.
there, Sally.
I said, it is actually about Please tell Tom they love to and
Yeah.
turkey. They tend to be a little, they don't come too close and they're not very friendly. Came right up to the door as Lee was about to leave for school. Came up the steps.
A little
looked in
chilly.
the glass door. And as Lee was about to go, so Mom, this turkey was kind of looked at it and it stared right at me. I took a photo of it. I took a photo of it. It just stared at me. It was looking at me. I said, Leo, it's the strangest thing. He said, Mom, I got lost. And Leo walked out and it followed Leo to his car.
Yeah, just feet away from. All right.
And it followed Leo to his car.
Dad, you want me to take your notebook?
Friends of mine said, the spirit is often in April. So,
Hi, nice to meet you.
so there's the sandwich.
Yeah, we're gonna eat here. Is this your home? Lovely.
Thanks.
Lovely. I never thought it'd be cold about it 90 today.
Carol, you have a little bag here.
I saw the window and I'm like, what about that? Well, it really grows here. It's beautiful. No, it's
Yeah, I know. It's like a little lake.
Yeah, so I have a girlfriend in Warwick and I have one in Providence. And I have one in Wisconsin and yeah. I mean, we love Newport, we love Wisconsin, we love Rock Island. I've never been over there. Like, so it's interesting to like go to Massachusetts and then come back down. And,
Is the Shanty still here?
Right down the road.
It was, you're right.
It's absolutely stunning here. It's gorgeous. You know, I don't want to go.
Good. Thanks, honey. And then the playlist.
might have been.